He was the editor of a very famous British Panorama.
Panorama, sorry.
A very sort of famous investigative news reportage show called Panorama.
I love the word.
And that one day they had the
reportage.
Reportage. What a great word. Great name for a perfume.
Yeah. What are you wearing
a
today?
Reportage.
Oh, reportage. G'day, I'm Lachlan Cartwright.
I'm Ravi, Somaiya.
We are Breaker Media, and we are coming to you from Cowgirl in the West Village, where the kitchen is very lively. There is construction going on. There are sirens. It is downtown New York. We are back for another pod where you can find us on YouTube, but where you can't find us is on Spotify and on Apple and on places where you get your pods. Because, Ravi...
Well, if you do find us there, let me know, because I'm not... It's kind of like Schrodinger's podcast for me currently. I'm not sure if it's alive or dead. So send a signal if you find us there.
So at some point, we will have the pod up on Spotify and Apple. For now, you can watch it on YouTube.
It'll be like a cliffhanger for you guys. You know, will it be on Apple and Spotify? Will it not be on Apple and Spotify?
Can I find this pod? Can I not?
Let us know.
The question will be answered at some point. We did ask a lot of questions this week in the newsletter, and we were able to answer several of them. Our lead item was about a bloke named David Efune. It has taken me all week. We've been reporting this story out all week, and it has taken me this long to pronounce the bloke's name. But he is the publisher and the owner of the New York Sun. And is still trying to buy the Telegraph, which is, a pretty influential publication in the world.
So from my reporting, I think it's David Efune.
Efune. Someone said to me, just think of a dove. David Efune.
He reminds me very much of a dove.
But for me, clearly, it has taken me all week to pronounce this bloke's name. Thankfully, we nailed the yarn, and now David Efune. Efune, David. Right.
I love the fact that during explaining how you could say the guy's name, you did not say the guy's name. As the owner of a weird name, I have learned to not care even 1% how people pronounce my name.
How do people mispronounce your name?
It's because it's got an A in the middle of it. Like, my name is different depending where in the world I am. In the south of England, I'm Ravi. In the north of England, I'm Ravi. Depending where I am in America, it changes. And
your last name, how do people...
Somaiya is how you pronounce it. Oh my God, you can't even begin. And
begin.
The thing is,
Tickle me.
The best one, someone once read out Mr. P. Sorry Eugen.
Oh,
which I thought
was
a pretty good one. I think it was to do with typos, maybe.
Okay.
But I just learned fundamentally, to steal a line from Silicon Valley, a name is just a noise people make when they want to get your attention. And so as long as I know someone is seeking my attention, I don't really care.
Well, David Efune,
who might have a different attitude than me, and we're sorry if that's the case.
He's getting a lot of attention. He is a bloke who got back into the media game, I think 3 years ago, by restarting the New York Sun, which was a historic publication in New York. A number of big name writers have gone through there. Ben Smith, who went on to found Semaphore, Barry Weiss, who went on to found the Free Press, and he has restarted the New York Sun. But why we found him to be a fascinating character, we're all about characters here at Breaker, why we thought we should dig into him is for several months now, he has been trying to buy the Telegraph. And Ravi, as someone who's worked in Britain, as I have, just tee up for our audience the Telegraph.
So the Telegraph is one of Britain's great newspapers. It's a broadsheet. It comes out every day and also on Sunday. And I guess you could look at it like the Guardian's on the left wing, the Times is sort of in the centre, and the Telegraph is on the right wing.
The Torygraph is a nickname for it.
Yeah, it's kind of got a revolving door with the conservative part of British politics. There are so many very prominent British politicians.
Boris Johnson famously wrote for them.
Dominic Lawson, who have gone through both places. The current editor of its former sister magazine, The Spectator, is Michael Gove, who had too many roles in government. And to me, it's always the newspaper of like a retired army officer who went to Sandhurst and complains about France but has a house there. That's roughly who I would describe.
But David wants to shake that up. If he is able to to purchase the Telegraph.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that he's clearly what we heard is a very ambitious and entrepreneurial guy, but he's been operating in this pretty small world of American Jewish media. You know, he started a publication called the Allgemeine, which...
what is the Allgemeine?
The Allgemeine is like a journal, like a journal of Jewish interests, I guess, and Israeli interests. Started in 1972 by this former New York Herald Tribune reporter called Gershon Jacobson. And he ran the thing until he shuffled off this mortal coil in the early 2000s, and his family started looking for a successor. Someone recommended this guy, Efune, and they hit it off, and he'd been running that publication. And what everyone said to me is that he's always networking. He's always looking for the next thing. He's always looking for the next opportunity. And so he started off in this small world of American Jewish publications, which is a significant world, as you point out. Some really big people have come through it. It's widely read. I'm not disparaging in any sense, but it's on a different order of magnitude to something like the Telegraph. I guess the analogy would be if someone you'd never heard of from Australia was fronting a consortium to buy the Wall Street Journal, was its preferred bidder. And
there was an Aussie who went on to buy the Wall Street Journal, Uncle Roots.
I wouldn't describe him as obscure, though. And every journalist in the building would be jumping out of their skin. Who is this guy? Like, what does he want? And from our reporting, we talked to this guy called Martin Peretz, who used to own the New Republic, and who knows Efune because they move in the same circles. And what he said is that the pitch Efune was making about what he wanted to do to the Telegraph is to turn it conservative, Zionist, and literate.
And that has not gone down well with people I speak to at the Telegraph. They're incredibly frustrated about this whole process. And just to back up, I think it's important for the context, is the Telegraph used to be owned by the Barclay brothers. They got into a large amount of debt. There was then a situation where Redbird IMI, which is run by Jeff Zucker, the former president of CNN, came in with money from the UAE.
Yeah.
They bought the Telegraph. That again did not go down well with the journos at the Telegraph. There were some changes in laws in the UK, which made it more stringent for foreign investment in media companies. So that prohibited that sale from going ahead. So then you had a situation where Redbird and Jeff Zucker were left holding the bag of these assets. So not just the Telegraph, but the Specky, the Spectator. They were able to offload the Specky to Sir Paul Marshall, who also owns GB News. I think that sale was 100 million. But then they were still left with the Telegraph, and they needed to offload this. They needed to find a buyer. Now, somewhere along the line, Jeff Zucker and Ari Berkoff, who runs Lion Tree, found David. And David has been trying to find the money to buy the Telegraph. Now, the issue is he doesn't have 550 million, which is the price. He said, I'll be able to get the money. And he said to Zucker and Berkoff, or Berkoff said to Zucker, or someone said to someone, this is the bloke who's going to get the money. And so you have this kind of almost Benny Hill, Fawlty Towers situation that has played out for several months of David trying to get the money from geezers that you spoke to. Also, coming across people like Todd Boehly, who owns Chelsea Football Club. He also owns Eldridge Industries that has investments in things like Penske Media. Then he also came across Leon Black, of all people, who used to have Apollo and also was mates with Jeffrey Epstein. So he's been going through a series of different potential investors, but we are still at the reality that he does not have $550 million. It's almost like the bloke just woke up one day and like, I've got an idea, I'm going to buy the Telegraph. And it's like, I admire the gumption, I admire the hustle.
Could call it chutzpah.
At the end of the day, he needs to find $550 million. And you spoke to a number of geezers who he's been hitting up for money.
By the way, we had a debate before we started filming about whether the word geezers was offensive.
And
Lachlan says no.
And I said, I call a lot of people geezers, both young and old, and it's a compliment. I can understand if someone Googles geezers, they see it's a derogatory term or a negative term. It is not. It is a term of endearment. If I've called you a geezer, it means there's some heart to it. So geezers, the geezers you spoke to.
We mean it in the fondest, warmest fashion. And genuinely, they were all very nice, and thank you all for speaking to me.
But the geezers you spoke to were being hit up for 10, 20 mil here or there,
Yeah,
right?
the way it was described to me is that he doesn't have the money. He doesn't have one or two major investors, and candidly, it crossed my mind that if he did, what would they need him for? They could just go buy the Telegraph themselves. And he seems to be going around, especially in the kind of New York Jewish community, asking various people for what was described to me as 10, 20, 30 million.
Do you have 10, 20, 30 million to start a media company, by the way? Because we did without 10 or 20, 30 million. Just rinsing our savings every week.
I'm looking. I feel like there's a bag of cash somewhere that I've not yet found.
Well, we do know now, David, and we reached out to him, as we do, with all the subjects of our reporting. And he came back after I sent him a series of questions.
To step back for a second, as far as we're aware, and correct us if we're wrong, he hasn't really given any substantive public statements. And so to wind it back a little further, after we finished our reporting, Lachlan, like all responsible reporters, reached out to him and put a bunch of questions to him. Now, he did not answer those questions because, candidly, I don't think he can. Those questions were along the lines of, what do you intend with the Telegraph?
Do you have 550 million bucks?
Yeah.
That was my main question. Do you have the money or not?
We started with the biggies, but he did respond with a very lengthy statement. And so we consider this to be our interview with David Efune, if that is how we pronounce his name. And he's going to be represented by Lachlan's phone and the email on it.
And one of the, besides do you have the money, the other real key question we were trying to answer is what would you do with the Telegraph if you got it? And it's very clear from his email to me that the New York Times is an obsession of his.
Yeah.
He has spoken about this at numerous events. In fact, there was a New York Sun third anniversary shindig on Sunday that happened where he got up on stage and started talking about how the New York Sun is really taking on the New York Times. Now, that is arguable whether that is actually a thing, but it's clear when he has made these remarks to me that he says things like, I'm just going to quote him, you could say that reestablishing the New York Sun to be the nation's most compelling alternative to the New York Times and everything it has to offer is among my life's goals. I believe that my dim view of the Times is shared by many Americans. It's a paper that has well and truly lost its way and is ripe for challenging. He goes on to say, the New York Sun historically played that role. It was founded 18 years before the Times and charted a similar history, but we were fighting for the abolition of slavery when the Times was still on the fence. Same with the right to vote. At so many turns, we've been on the right side of history while the Times is not. He goes on to say, see the commentary of James Bennett, who was the editor who was famously whacked over the Tom Cotton editorial. Barry Weiss and Adam Rubenstein as they left the paper for more recent chronicle of journalistic malpractice. And if you can find it affirmed in Bennett's speech at the Fund for American Studies, he is obsessed with the New York Times. He is called the New York Times Hamas propaganda. And I did reach out to the New York Times as we did last week. And the New York Times did not respond to a request for comment. But this is what his vision is. If he gets the Telegraph, what I'm told by numerous people with knowledge of the matter is he wants to turn it into a first read broadsheet to take on the New York Times and turn it into a pro-Israeli publication.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I heard too. And I find it fascinating, people's obsession with the New York Times. It's just a newspaper. Don't read it if you don't like it. I just do not understand it. I remember once when I worked there, I was covering Occupy Wall Street.
I also covered Occupy Wall Street for the New York Post.
Yeah, I covered, actually, it was the London version, so it was Occupy the City or whatever it was. We're very international. And
they actually had me camped. We get some of the point, we'll get into it. They actually had me camped down and in bed myself with the protesters.
Did you do that drum circle thing?
Undercover. Did I do what, sorry?
The human megaphone.
I didn't do the human megaphone, but they had me camped down there. And I started to bring my camping gear and I went undercover and it was the front page of the New York Post. So you were covering the
I was covering the
across
London one, and
pond.
I got in these fascinating debates because everyone's read Noam Chomsky, and they're fascinated by it. It kind of makes them, for whatever reason, I don't know anything about Noam Chomsky beyond his existence. I haven't read any of his work, but it can make people a bit conspiratorial reading Noam for some reason. So they would come up to me and say, well, you're a shill for effectively what they would describe as the Illuminati. And I was like, that's so interesting, because I've never been in a
Are you a shill for the Illuminati? Can you?
Well, look,
I mean,
I
that
might
would
be,
be a
but
great
like
reveal.
But I wish, because it sounds
Second week of the Breaker Pod, Lachlan, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Illuminati.
It sounds lucrative, but no one's ever made me an offer. And I just
Breaker
couldn't...
at breakermedia.com if you would like to make Ravi an offer about the Illuminati.
Yeah, I'm not going to come to Davos because it sounds boring, honestly. But I'll go to that other weird
The Peter
convention.
Thiel one. The one that Thiel does.
Yeah, there's a couple of
One in
shady
Germany
ones.
he does,
in
yeah.
Germany, that one,
Yeah.
But I
We should
couldn't...
both go.
We definitely. Thank you. Invite two of us. I'll have a +1. I couldn't explain to these people there was no conspiracy. There was no, underlying sinister force that was driving it. It was simple human stuff. Like, why does the New York Times do what it does? Because it's a group of human beings responding to society.
Yeah, did you see a massive conspiracy at the New York Times when you were working there to run Hamas propaganda or to run any kind of propaganda?
I didn't see a massive conspiracy to get anything done. It was very difficult. It was very difficult to arrange a conspiracy. I tried to arrange many conspiracies to get a story published, and it would take months or weeks or certainly a lot of meetings.
Right.
And, there's this sort of, someone I spoke to about Telegraph and Efune described it as a lightning rod, and I think that's exactly it. It's like a lightning rod for, like, if you talk to someone who's much more to the left than Efune is, they'll tell you the New York Times is villainous, and it should be called out for its sins against the Arab population of the Middle East. And if you talk to people like Efune, they'll tell you that it should be called out for...
That's when you know you're doing a good job, right? When both sides are wacky.
I mean, I once heard, I think it was Catherine Graham said, you're either doing a great job or you're doing an absolutely terrible job. So it's...
I'll err on the side the Times does incredible journalism.
Yeah, I mean, so I love many things about that newspaper, one of which is its underlying ethos of trying to find just exactly what happened. Now, I do agree with Efune that it's moved away from that in recent years. I think just because it's under so much pressure. But I think what people end up doing is taking, candidly, artifacts of a lack of bravery and casting them as a conspiracy, and it's just not.
He has this obsession and this total laser focus of going after the New York Times, and he wants to buy the Telegraph to try and take on the Times.
Absolutely, and two things crossed my mind. So lots of people said to me, well, David he's unbiased. I thought that's great, but as far as I can make out, his definition of unbiased is, of course, there's only one interpretation of the events that I'm looking at, and it's unbiased for me to put forward that perspective. And I think that's lots of people's definition of unbiased now. I think that we've all kind of fallen into political factions, and they believe they don't see their view of the world as a view or a set of beliefs. They see it as a truth, and a truth that has to be reflected if something is to call itself fair. And, I have a great deal of sympathy for journalists, because I am one, and I have a great deal of sympathy for politicians. And I think, as far as we're concerned, the only solution is follow the story where it goes. Don't go in afraid, be willing to be shouted at and just follow it and see what happens.
Well, a lot of people were shouting at me this week. The sad reality of what's happened, though, with the Telegraph is that they are in suspended animation because of this. They are in total limbo. I've spoken to several journos across the pond. And as a result of this beauty contest, as it was put to me, it wasn't really a sale, it was a beauty contest. They can't make decisions over at the Telegraph. They can't crack on with the work that they want to do, the big picture work. And they're just kind of sitting around waiting to see how this thing plays out. Now, obviously, we reached out to all the key parties, including Joe Sucker and Redbird and Lion Tree and Ari Burkhoff.
Yeah.
The other key player in all this was Rupert Murdoch, who we were able to reveal has been advising David and playing a very and having a really keen interest in what's going on now. Famously, he tried to he wanted to buy the Times. And so he now owns the Wall Street Journal. And I think he's got a mischief making in the background, having some fun with this, because he told, according to sources I spoke with, that $550 million is worth it. Now, I'm bearing in mind Jeff Bezos spent $250 million buying the Washington Post. So Rupert Murdoch is in the background, kind of, advising and helping Davod. But, fascinating to me, he's not, putting his hands in his pockets, Ravi, and saying, here's a couple of quid, we'll help out with this. So I think this thing is going to be, in this weird state for some time.
Yeah, and I feel for the Telegraph. It's a really proud newspaper, whether you agree with its editorial line or not, and I often don't. It's a really proud newspaper with a great history. It gave me my start in one of the first places I wrote for in Britain was the Telegraph. Yeah, I had this weird...
What was the first yarn?
I just remember there was this big story where, sorry to say, but I lied to everyone, and I was trying to land an interview with Sean Penn. And I told the Telegraph that I landed this interview. I told Sean Penn's people that I could guarantee him the cover of the magazine. I couldn't. And it kind of just worked out. And I had a great interview. It was really fun. I got Sean Penn. It was on the cover of the magazine.
Interviewing Sean Penn?
Yeah, so it was very interesting. He was very intense. It was my first experience of that weird Hollywood thing.
Yeah.
Which actually is a thing now with Blake Lively.
This wasn't a junket.
Yeah, it was a junket.
Right.
And it was for his movie Into the Wild. And... the thing, I stopped doing them after that because the thing that's being revealed now when people are interviewing Blake Lively or other celebrities, and it's really awkward. It's so strange because you have 10, 15 minutes, you're pulled aside before you go in, and someone who takes their life incredibly seriously, given that their job is wrangling movie stars.
The PR.
Yeah. And they know that their career is not their career, but their job or their reputation is on the line if this idiot goes in and upsets Mr. Penn. And so they very seriously tell you what you can and cannot talk about. And if you're me, that's a red rag to a bull. And
how do you deal with fame?
I still haven't come to terms with it, Lachlan. I still haven't come to terms with it. You'll read about it in my memoirs.
People that are dealing with fame were our unlikely friends this week, which is
what a segue.
Which is a recurring feature in the newsletter. Last week we wrote about Andrew Cuomo and Modi, which was a cracking item. This week we wrote about Jessica Reese-Krauss, Jessica Reed-Krauss, Meghan McCain, and Tulsi Gabbard, who are unlikely friends. We had Meghan McCain, Tulsi
Gabbard.
Thank you.
And Jessica Reed-Krauss.
Correct.
And I like this item a great deal just because it reveals that the kind of old orthodoxies about who was aligned with who and why, they're gone. Like what we used to call the left and what we used to call the right, to me, they're a circle and they kind of meet in the middle. And people that you wouldn't expect are kind of coming together in these interesting ways. And I guess you could say it's a good thing, or how change happens. But, if you were going to draw up a list of three ladies who might be friends, you probably wouldn't draw up that list, but there it is.
And they all came together differently. I spoke with Jessica, who told me how she became friends with Meghan McCain. It happened a few years ago when she was covering the Johnny Depp case. And she was very prolific and is still prolific on Instagram. And her Instagram profile was taken down. So Meghan McCain came to her aid during that period. Meghan McCain was introduced by Van Jones, of all people, to Tulsi.
Another unlikely friend.
Another unlikely friend. And then they all three of them came together. Meghan and Jessica came together to help support Tulsi as she was going through these confirmation hearings as the director of intelligence, which is a gig she was confirmed in. And so it was a very unique threesome. And as Jessica told me, it amuses her, to your point, because they all come from different political viewpoints, but they could all be in the group chat and they can all be sharing some gossip and having, sharing parenting advice and having a laugh. So,
yeah, that's exactly it. And by the way, I think the Depp Heard trial was one of the most seismic media events that the old media really was not involved in. And it made all these alliances and it made all these stars that, like, if you're in the Manhattan media, you don't tend to pay attention to. And I think it's a shame because that's the world now.
We had a great follow as well to our scoop about Zero Bond. Last week, we broke a yarn about Zero Bond, one of the most exclusive private members clubs in the city, being in negotiations with our mate Tillman
Tillman Fertitta.
Who owns, amongst other things, Bubba the Gump Shrimp Company.
The Bubba Gump Shrimp Company.
Bubba Gump Shrimp Company. And is buying up real estate all over the city. He bought Keen's, this legendary steakhouse. He bought the corner store, or he has a stake in the corner store, which is becoming the new downtown hotspot, and also in the Catch Group. And so we broke that yarn last week. Eater, the food industry go-to.
And our new friends. Thank you,
Eater.
friends.
Advanced the story by getting a statement. I'd reached out to Tillman's people. They did not respond, as I have this effect on people sometimes. But they did get back to Eater, confirming our story, saying that there were talks, there was no deal done. So the question was, well, what's going on with the deal? More reporting to advance the story. Now, it turns out, Ravi, there are several investors, actually more than a dozen investors, that Tillman is looking to buy out. The majority are on board with this deal because it's a payday. There is one holdout, mate. There is one holdout. That holdout is a bloke who we're not going to identify on the pod, but we are aware of their identity, who is a person that is holding out not for financial reasons, not because he wants more money, but because his pickup line and the reason he can pull chicks is to say to women, allegedly, I am the owner of Zero Bond. That is the boast. I'm the owner of Zero Bond. And that goes to Scott Santiano, is the actual owner of Zero Bond.
Yeah.
Founder. But he uses this line, apparently, to pull chicks, to pull women, and does not want to give up that privilege to be able to say, I'm the owner of Zero Bond, and let's go wherever and do whatever, allegedly. And so he is the holdout. He is the one and only holdout that is...
That's Lachlan's line.
That is, yeah, for our lawyers. He is the one and only holdout that is apparently holding up this deal. And what I'm told, it is frustrating the absolute fuck out of Scott Santiano, who wants to get the deal done, as well as our coverage, which is also helping to, or not helping to get the deal across. But this one bloke, and that's his pickup line. I'm the owner of Zero Bond.
I love when the serious and corporate and big money gets derailed by the deeply, deeply, deeply human. I was so embracing pettiness last week.
You were.
And this week, I'm going to embrace, what would I call that? Boys. I would call it boys.
Blokes.
The
lads.
Yeah, it's a very boy thing to do. And, it's a tough dating environment. And it's also not a new trick. I remember when the Spotted Pig restaurant was open, not far from here at all, actually. Every 5 minutes, you'd meet someone who owned 0.001% of the Spotted Pig and was going around telling people they owned the Spotted Pig. It's one of those great tricks.
It's a line.
Yeah.
It's a line. And what else did we have this week? I feel like we had a smorgasbord of cracking yarns.
Or, because I can speak a little bit of Swedish, a smörgåsbord.
Oh, that's a...
Do you want to try and pronounce that? Smörgåsbord?
I'm still getting to grips with David Efune, so I'll work up to the Swedish.
Okay, next week. We also spoke to one of my favorite musicians, favorite New York musicians, Jerry LaBeija. And I remember coming across this guy's music on Spotify, and I'm just like, what the fuck is that? It's so strange and so wonderful. And it's this combination of stuff that if you're a guy from Surrey in England like I am, you just would never, ever, ever come across. I can't even describe it. It's just listen to it.
It's now the music for our pod.
It's now the music for our pod, exactly. So, because Joey was generous enough to allow us to use it. So, listen out. Go back to the beginning and you see what you think. And he was telling us about New York as a music city. And this, I could talk about this forever, and you guys are going to be so bored, and you're definitely going to be bored. But
I'm here for it.
I think the greatest thing about one of the greatest things about New York.
What do you mean I'm going to be bored?
No. I know, but you don't know how long I'm planning to talk about it.
Well, okay. This is where in edit we'll go back and forth.
Exactly. One of my favorite things about New York is just the quality of the incidental music. Actually, I was walking here now, and this guy who I think might be homeless. I don't know. He tends to sit outside here and yell about Gaza.
Do you look like me?
No, you're a very elegant fellow.
Thank you.
Was playing Vitamin C by this band called Can, which is just a great, great song, and not like a widely known song.
How does it go?
Hey, you. You're losing, you're losing, you're losing,
I love that track.
Losing. You do love that track.
I do love that track. See,
yeah.
I said I'm into fucking music.
I know you're into music.
Only when you can sing it to me like that.
I'm only 10% of the way through my story. Calm down. And he agreed. He thought that New York was just the most fabulous musical city, and if you live here, You hear music coming through your walls. You walk through the streets. You hear music coming out of cars. And he just took us on his musical journey. And like, I love music. I listen to a lot of music. He surprised me, and I'd recommend you all listen to the playlist because it's great. Like, I was in the gym this morning listening to Daddy Yankee Gasolina, which weirdly I had never come across in my life before, and I love it. It's my new favorite song. Thank you, Joey.
Thank you, Joey. We also started a new feature in the newsletter called Scooplets, which are small little scoops that
it's what we call them.
Come across.
If you have a better name for the section, let us know. But we call them Scooplets.
And amongst those were some news about The Messenger, which was Jimmy Finkelstein's ill-fated publication that hired 300 odd people, including a lot of great journos. And he had this vision where he wanted to bring back 60, it was like Meet the Press versus 60 Minutes meets Vanity Fair. It was very ambitious, threw a lot of money into it, burned a lot of cash, and sadly had to lay off a lot of people who started a class action lawsuit. The development is that class action lawsuit has been settled. They are now just working out the terms of it. But did you follow The Messenger last year?
I mean, there are so many media disasters, sadly, that it kind of got lost in the noise a little bit for me. It's the most notable in that it landed so splashy and crashed so immediately.
There was this great picture in the New York Times that had an interview with the founders, with Jimmy Finkelstein.
Who founded The Hill, by
correct.
the way. Yeah.
And Dan Wakeford, who was the editor, and this bloke here's the best nickname, Ravi. He is Mad Dog. Who was the nickname almost trounces his actual name, but Mad Dog was running the commercial business. Richard Bigman is his name. He got the nickname Mad Dog because he bit a woman while he was at Condé, and there was a settlement. So there was this
Allegedly.
picture. No, I mean, it's actually there was a settlement, it was all confirmed, but there was this great picture in the Times of these three white blokes who were like, we're going to revolutionize media. And they
by
did
doing the same things we've been doing for 50 years.
Yeah, well, by doing commodity news that they couldn't monetize. There was no business plan. They were just chasing traffic. They were chasing clicks. And sadly, a lot of good journos lost their jobs. They sued. And now Finkelstein, I think, is made good. It's kind of unclear. I reached out to all the lawyers involved. It's unclear what people will see from that, if anything. But there was a resolution to that. The other bit of news we had in Scooplets this week was some musical chairs going on at Condé Nast. I love the inner workings of media companies, particularly ones that are these sort of legacy media companies like Condé Nast. So the Scooplet we had is that a number of titles are moving from the 25th floor, where they're all crammed in, to the 27th floor. Among them is Wired, I think Self and Them and Allure, and I'm missing one. They're all moving up to the 27th floor because they're trying to...
Traveler.
Correct, thank you. They're all trying to get everyone back 4 days a week. And the problem is the 27th floor, the Wi-Fi is spotty. So I don't know how that's going to go.
But Anna Wintour's Wi-Fi is fine, in case anyone is concerned.
Was she staying on the 25th floor?
In her lovely suite of offices.
She'll be fine.
Gorgeous.
She'll be fine. And the other scooplet worth noting is the dramas going on MSNBC, where Joy Reid's show has been cancelled, where Alex Wagner her show is also being cut. And a lot of staffers sadly found out about this through the media. And even sadder, some of them found out because someone left on the printer at 30 Rock. One of the, I guess, HR people must have left the printout of the rollout of how this was going to go, who was going to be impacted, what shows were going to get cut before people were told. So people were actually finding out through this bit of paper left on the printer. We've all had experiences where we've sent the wrong email to someone, or we've left something on the printer. Sadly, that's how people found out that they were potentially going to be impacted by these changes.
Yeah, it's of course very sad, and it's not the first story like this, and it won't be the last, I'm sure. What strikes me, though, is it would be very, very Inception if on that rollout plan was the line, "Leave rollout plan on printer." Do you think?
Do you think that was one of their tactics?
It would be like a loop.
It was like a time saver. They were just like, look, I can't be asked chatting to Sophie and
they're
Michael.
They're going to know.
And
as soon as I email saying, do you have time for a chat, they're going to know.
Let's just leave the rollout plan so they can they could. No, I mean, it was obviously a stuff up, and Bob from HR is going to get a talking to. But the dramas that are playing out at MSNBC are something that we're noting in different media companies. The Washington Post, we're noting it all around the trap. So if you have a tip for us, Breaker at breakermedia.com. What else, Ravi?
I was going to talk about newsroom biting.
Please.
So newsroom biting.
Have you bit someone?
No, but it's
is this a confessional?
When you were talking about mad. No, I don't.
What I love about this pod,
as far as I'm aware,
we have a rule. We close the letter on a Tuesday evening. It's off stone. It's shipped, and we have a rule. Unless there's a massive emergency, we don't talk. We don't talk before we get to the pod. So I have no idea what you're going to say. There is no rundown. There's no rehearsals. I make a couple of notes, but it is loose. And therefore, we're going to talk about biting. Yeah, well, we're both loose units.
When you mentioned your friend Mad Dog there, it's
Mad Dog Beekman.
Mad Dog
Beckman.
Beekman? I don't know.
He's just Mad Dog.
Clearly.
He moved to the UK and opened a pub. That's what he did after the Messenger.
Fascinating. Wonderful. Good for him.
That's what I want to do one day, Ravi.
Yeah.
Open a
pub. Everyone needs a dream. There was another famous story, a total alleged. I'm not going to name this person because I'm not sure of the legality of it, honestly. But it was an executive, a very, very senior media executive then and now. Even more senior now, I would argue.
Well, now I want to know more.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Guess who? Don't sue.
Well, I guess I did ask him personally, so I think I feel maybe justified in doing it. There was an allegation, strictly an allegation. I have no evidence for it. I can't say whether it happened or not. That Mark Thompson, who ran the BBC...
No, this is true.
And then the new...
this is true.
Well, hold on. Yeah. You can chime in a second because I'm really curious to know if you know.
It's true.
But I'll just explain. So he ran...
And is now running CNN.
He ran the BBC, ran the New York Times, ran CNN.
This is a great story.
And there's a story... that he was the editor of a very famous British Panorama.
Panorama, sorry.
A very sort of famous investigative news reportage show called Panorama.
I love the word.
And
reportage.
that one day they had
reportage.
Reportage. What a great word. Great name for a perfume.
Yeah. What are you wearing today?
Reportage. And there was this story, an allegation, I guess, that he was the editor of this show, and after the meeting, he was sitting around reading a newspaper. Someone came up to him to ask him a question about something that had arisen in the meeting, and without any preamble or even postscript, he just leaned over and bit her on the arm, and then went on about his day. And then he came to work at the New York Times when I was working there, and I was covering the paper from within the paper as a media reporter. And so
that's got to be a hard ask. You're covering your own paper.
It's hard if you take your life very seriously. It's not that hard.
You don't take your life seriously, Ravi?
I take my life very seriously, but I don't, not as seriously as the people who work there take their lives. I'll say that. And I thought I would ask him. He was absolutely appalled. It was a terrible idea.
You just front him up in the lift?
I went to his office.
Jumped him?
I went to his office.
You door knocked him in his own office?
I went to his office to say hi. I emailed him beforehand in a courteous fashion. As I was the reporter covering the New York Times, he didn't say no. But I think he probably wasn't expecting me to ask him.
And what did he say?
I don't exactly remember. I think a chill entered the air, and I did not get
bite you.
No, he did not bite me, and I did not get a substantive answer. But it's interesting to me that multiple people are biting are accused of biting in newsrooms.
Allegedly, I was once told when I was working at a publication I won't name, just chuck a few more allegeds into that story and we'll be fine. That was by the lawyer, by the way. So that bloke, the person that Mark Thompson allegedly bit, is on record in The Guardian talking about the experience. He actually went public and talked about it.
Great. In that case, it's not even my allegation, so I'm even more protected.
So it does seem like there's a theme in media where people are biting.
Look, I can understand that sometimes you see another human being, like, just give him a gentle nip, you know? Yeah. It's like a sort of mammalian urge, I guess, that maybe we all have, or at least I have, I guess, sometimes. But it's strange that anyone's acting on it.
Well,
I've never bitten Lachlan.
I was about to say, we're only 2 weeks into this enterprise, so you'll know when it's getting really interesting. When I've got like a chunk missing out of my arm, and people are like, "What happened, Lachlan?" And I'm like, "Well, Ravi was annoyed. I was still making calls at 7 p.m. as we're trying to get the newsletter.
I was annoyed about that,
and so he bit me."
As we were remote, I would have had to go to his apartment and bite him, and that's too much effort for a bite.
any other things on your mind, mate, this week?
I mean, I've got a lot on my mind, but I don't think it's anything we need to concern our dear viewers about.
So subscribe, please, to Breaker. You can go to breakermedia.com to subscribe to our newsletter. It's full of stories and scoops every Tuesday. If you have tips from us, we're either Ravi at breakermedia.com or Lachlan at breakermedia.com. You can also find us walking through the streets of the West Village, seeing Brooke Shields, eating a slice of pizza out of a pizza box. And we'll be back next week. And you can like and subscribe.
We don't know yet. You can like and subscribe on YouTube.
And it's all up to the news gods. If we can get this bloody pod on Spotify and Apple and all the places you listen to pods, even the shit ones, we'll be there at some point.
I feel like that's a rite of passage for any podcaster or video maker to complain about platforms. So I'm happy we got it done.
Cheers for listening. Cheers for watching.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.